And Tashdile Samalo, Tashdile to every one of you. Now for the last 6 weeks, we have been speaking about some of the major issues that concerns us, and what I would do if you were to entrust me with the responsibility of the Sikyong. And today we will speak about finance. Now, finance, of course, is a very important component of running a government. Without finance, we cannot run government, we cannot run developmental work, we cannot run our administration. Every one of us know that. When we speak about financing the Central Tibetan administration, then we have to look at it from a two-pronged approach. The one approach, of course, is to meet all the immediate needs, to meet all the immediate financial need of the community in the short term. So whatever expenses have been outlined for the upcoming year, that the CTA leadership, it is the responsibility of the Kashak to see to it that that amount is sourced from different sources. And the second and more important thing is, now how do we sustain ourselves financially in the long run without depending on others, or without minimal or no dependency on others at all. Now how do we achieve that in the long run? We have to start now. We don't have too many choices. First, I'll cover Central Tibetan administration. Now in the last 60 years, despite the initial bungling in the management of our resources, our financial resources, under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and support of many kind-hearted individuals, organizations and governments, our Kashak, our successive Kashak has also been able to manage the needs of the community. And when we started first in the 1960s, much of the expenses came from the private office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And the trust in the name of His Holiness the Dalai Lama also even today continue to support us in social, health and educational programs. Then purchase of many of the Tibetan community centers in the West and offices of Tibet also received support from the private office of His Holiness Dalai Lama. In 1972, given the financial constraint under which we were functioning, our people decided to make an annual voluntary contribution in the form of Green Book voluntary tax, which continues to this day. So even today, Tibetans in India, Nepal and Bhutan collect 36 plus 10, 46 rupees. And in the West, $46 if you are employed, $50 more, so that is $96. Now, the Green Book contribution has also become a symbol of Tibetan identity when we use it for elections or when people want to receive benefits from the government, from the administration. Now, even though the contribution meets only just a fraction of the total expenses, it nevertheless is significant in many other ways. Now, eventually, a Blue Book was also introduced for non-Tibetans who support the Tibetan cause to make their contributions. Then, as I was a student of economics when I joined the parliament in 1996. I have been for many years part of the Budget Estimate Committee of the Parliament, also part of the Budget Presentation Review Committee formed by Professor Samdong Rinpoche. So I have made quite a contribution to maintaining financial accountability of the Central Tibetan administration, that is the Kashak, to the Parliament. Now, if I have to give you an idea of how much do we spend every year, for this current year, the running year, 2021, when the budget was passed, we categorize our expenses into three different headings. One is the recurring expenses. Recurring expenses includes salaries and all other expenses related to running offices. So that comes to about 748 million Indian rupees, which is equivalent to about 10.68 million US dollars. So that is a little more than 10.5. Then we also have a category called special expenses. Special expenses includes those projects which does not have financial support from outside, but that has to be funded through the government treasury from the finance department. That comes to about 421 million Indian rupees, or equivalent to about 6 million US dollars. Then we have the larger sum, which is the earmarked fund, that the departments have accumulated over the years, and then fund that we receive for particular project. Those are earmarked funds. Now that comes to about 1,545 million Indian rupees, which is equivalent to about 22 million US dollars. So the total in a year comes to about 2,714 million Indian rupees, and equivalent to about 38.5 million US dollars. Now, the amount of the Green Book contribution that we collect is estimated to be about 180 million Indian rupees, which is just about 2.57 million US dollars. Now, if you compare that with the expenses, we can get an idea of how much are we able to contribute as Tibetans, how much are we able to contribute to meet the expenses. Now, if you compare that amount, 2.5 million US dollars that we collect as Green Book contribution, to the 10.68 million US dollar recurring expenses, and that comes to about 24% of the total recurring expenses. So what Tibetans contribute is able to meet only 24% of our recurring expenses, that is to pay salaries and to maintain the office. Now, if you take the total amount, the consolidated amount of how much has been sanctioned, then it comes to, from the 38.76, if you take 2.5 million, it comes to only about 6.68% of our total expenditure. Now you know exactly how much Tibetans contribute in our own expenses to meet all our recurring expenses, to meet all our social, educational, health programs, and political campaign advocacy programs. This will also give you an idea as to what we need to do more. So during my service in the parliament for about 20 years, I have noticed that from the 1960s, every 5 years, our recurring expenses has doubled. So every 5 years, it has doubled by 100%. So doubled means, increased by 100%. It has doubled every 5 years. When we are talking about having sanctioned 38.76 million US dollar for this running year, that doesn't mean to say that we spent all the money, but that also doesn't mean to say that we are not. There are a certain amount of money that comes through the year after the budget was passed. The amount that was not included in the consolidated budget, Kashak has to seek interim sanction from the Standing Committee of the Tibetan Parliament. So if you add up all that, the numbers can still go up. From the budget that has been sanctioned, you have to deduct the amount that are unspent. So now if you want to really look at the actual number of how much we received in a year and how much we spent in a year, then we have to look at the report of the audit department that comes out a year after the expenses were made, or in the same year after the expenses were made. So this is just to give you a general idea of how much we spent and how much we ourselves contribute. From the time we came into exile till today, now if I have to give you an overview of how we received those excess money, the money that we spent, apart from what the Tibetans collect, from the time we came into exile till today, the Indian government has provided us with all humanitarian assistance, mainly in setting up settlements. The Indian government spent all the money. Then they set up schools and hospitals for which the Indian government pays. Many European governments also supported us through agencies like Red Cross, in resettlement programs, and initially also to provide training for the Tibetans and eventually granting political asylum for those who stayed back in Europe. Also to give you a little idea of how the relations between the US and the Tibetans have evolved over the years, the United States government was very much involved even before we came into exile. The relationship between the Tibetan freedom fighters and the CIA, led by Tsering and initially by Tsering, started in about 1956, and then 1957 we sent our first batch to be trained in Saipan for the guerrilla warfare training, or reconnaissance, information collection inside Tibet. Now that relationship between the Tibetans and the CIA, particularly under the State Department, lasted only about 1972, when Kissinger and Richard Nixon opened China to the world, when Nixon met with Chairman Mao. And at that time, they even asked us to shutter down our office of Tibet in New York, which they themselves helped set up in 1964. So the relationship went down. And then the U.S. relationship with the Tibetans started warming up again only around 1987, when His Holiness addressed the U.S. Human Rights Caucus on the 5-point peace proposal, which was succeeded by the Strasbourg proposal in Europe. And this also led to the U.S. Congress sanctioning budget for Voice of America radio, then 1,000 Tibetan immigration in 1990. And in between that, we all know that His Holiness, because of his proposal, 5-point peace proposal and Strasbourg proposal to resolve the Tibetan issue with the Chinese, and also because of His Holiness' global leadership in promoting peace, His Holiness was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So this VOA program and 1,000 Tibetan immigration program was approved in late 1990. The relationship improved after His Holiness started meeting with the U.S. presidents, starting with Bush Sr. in 1991, and then His Holiness also addressed both houses of the U.S. Congress informally at the rotunda of the Capitol in 1991. That eventually, the deepening relationship between His Holiness and the American people and His Holiness and the U.S. Congress and successive administration led to the establishment of U.S. coordinator appointment of U.S. coordinator for Tibet for the first time in 1997. And the amount of financial support also increased from that time. Now, the appointment of U.S. coordinator special coordinator for Tibet in 1997 was 5 years before U.S. adopted the U.S. Tibet Policy Act of 2002. So you can understand how the relationship between the U.S. and the Tibetans increased. And when the 2002 U.S. Tibet Policy Act was adopted, that provided for, that legally, by law, it provides for financial support also, apart from the status of negotiation and many other provisions in that act, which is even being reviewed today, which is in the Senate now. This relationship reached its height when His Holiness was conferred the U.S. Congressional Gold Medal in the presence of the U.S. President. So that is a general idea of how the U.S. relationship and the financial support from the U.S. increased over the years. So this is mainly because of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and also because of the efforts of the successive Tibetan administration to receive that much support. So today, overall, we can say that Indian government has been very, very supportive for the Tibetans. And then, of course, the second is the U.S. government. Now, we also have Canada, who started official immigration way back in 1972-73, when they took several hundred Tibetans to settle in Canada. And 8 years back, they received another 1,000 Tibetans. So Canada is the second largest home to Tibetans outside India, Nepal, Bhutan for the exiled Tibetans. Canada, even today, continue to support us on educational programs. Then also you have Australia, who has extended us support in receiving or providing political asylum to former political prisoners. And so those angles, the support given by the Indian government, support given by the US government, Canada, European countries, Australia. And then, of course, there are many number of individuals and organizations who helped us from the beginning till now. We should never forget that, because their contribution has been immense. But here, I cannot mention names of each and every individual and organization. So, however, today, we have to understand that there is not a single economy on this globe which is left unscarred by the COVID-19 pandemic. Even within our own community, all the small businesses that has to do with tourism and hospitality industry, or, farming, and everything has suffered. And then the section of Tibetans who depend on seasonal business, and so that business is a total complete washout this year. Nobody has gone to any of the markets to sell their wares. So now you can understand that this is definitely going to have an impact on our resources, on what we have been receiving so far. So we should be very, very vigilant, and we also should be very, very prepared in meeting these challenges ahead. Now, should I be entrusted with the responsibility of Sikyong? Now, what would I do? First, we have to set very clear, equitable policies and prioritize programs based on the need of the community. That is a must. As soon as we take office, we get into the office, we have to make an in-depth assessment of our financial position and how the present economic downturn all over the world is going to affect us. And then we have to create, in the long run, a roadmap for the future. Then in the medium and short term, we have to avoid all complacency in reaching out to governments, to political leaders, and to prominent members in the respective parliaments, whether it's US, Canada, Europe, wherever, in different nations, and more particularly the budget committees or the appropriations committee members, and make sure that we receive the money that has been earmarked to spend in the year 2021-22. So this is in the short term. Then we also have to deepen our existing relations with individuals and organizations that support us. We have to increase the network of Blue Book contributions, and we also have to look for new ways and means to get funding from other sources. Then we have to empower, or we have to encourage the settlement officers and local leaders to explore ways and means to fund local programs or to help the needy. So that we have to do to empower the leadership at the local level. Then, now, because of all this situation, or even without that, we have to pool the resources of everybody, including the settlement officers. Of course, the Kashak is there to lead, and the department in the center, and then the local settlement officers and local leaders, and all stakeholders for any given program to ensure that the fund is used meaningfully and judiciously for what it's meant for. We cannot waste other people's money or other taxpayers' money. Then we have to avoid extravagance at all cost. We cannot be extravagant. We cannot have duplication of programs, and we have to avoid all wastages when it comes to using our financial resources to while implementing the programs to optimize for the benefit of the community. Now, this is the responsibility of the CTA, the Kashak. If I'm entrusted, these are the things that I would do in the short term for CTA. Now, when we talk about long-term program, then we have to, normally when we talk about budget, people normally think that, okay, this has something only to do with how much the CTA receives fund and how they spend. But if we look at the larger picture, and if we look at the longer term, we cannot just restrict only on the Central Tibetan administration. We have to think about our larger community. Now, I'll give you a very brief overview of our community, the Exiled Tibetan community, and our financial position. Now, in the first few decades after coming into exile, most of your parents, grandparents, they have worked very, very hard under very, very adverse circumstances to overcome all those challenges. So initially, when the settlement started, they depended on 1 acre of dry land for farming, and then some small-scale dairy and some small-scale industries where you do handicraft work. And because of that situation, we were left with no other opportunity but to depend on donors for our survival in the beginning. And then the cooperative societies have also played a significant role in meeting the common needs of the community in terms of providing common services. Today, even if the farming activities have gone down comparatively, the cooperatives still continue to play a very important role in promoting the work of the farmers. Then, 10, 20 years into exile, we managed to prove our skill as retailers. So many Tibetans went to different parts of India to sell their sweaters for seasonal business, and that helped supplement our income from farming and dairy and handicraft work. So if I have to give you a general idea of the Tibetan sweater seasonal business, that is sweater selling business, now we are talking about at least 3,500 families registered under the All India Tibetan Refugee Traders Association that was set up mainly to enroll membership from Tibetan sweater sellers. They estimate that 70% of the Tibetan sweater sellers has become part of this larger body. So we are still talking about 1,500 to 2,000 families who are outside, who are not members of this trading association. So in all, we are talking about at least, let us say, 2 markets or 2 shops for every family on an average. Some have 3, 4, some have only 1. So on average, if we say 2 shops per family, we are talking about 3,500 into 2, 7,000. Plus, if we add another 1,500 to 2,000 who are not members of the association, then we are talking about at least 8,500 to 9,000 shops. Now, if each of these shops are selling 4 sacks of sweaters, which costs about 300,000 rupees, 3 lakh rupees, then every single shop is selling on an average 10 to 12 lakh or 1 million rupees worth of sweaters. So that is quite a large amount. That is quite a large amount for a refugee community. So when these people come back from a good business environment, when the business is good, these businesses bring back about 3,500 million rupees net profit, because the net profit comes to about 35% of the cost. So 3,500 million Indian rupees comes to about $51 million. So that much the Tibetans bring back every year to the settlements, and that lasts them for the other 6-7 months they live in the settlements if they are not engaged in other economic activities. Moreover, these sweater sellers serve a larger purpose of making sure the issue of Tibet remains in the heart and mind of the Indian people. We are talking about 8,500 shops. If every single shop sells about 4 sacks of goods, that has an average of 350 articles. We are talking about more than 1,000 different articles being sold by one shop. So in all these sweater selling areas, they have to interact with 12 million Indian people to sell these products. So you can imagine how much service the Tibetan sweater selling community has contributed in making sure that the issue of Tibet remains in the mind and heart of the people. Then the immigration programs followed, like I mentioned, in the 1970s to Canada, but that remained a small number. It did not increase very much after that. And then in the early 90s, Tibetans to the United States, and then 2012-13, you moved another 1,000 to Canada, and then you have an ongoing immigration program to Australia. Now, if we roughly say, okay, 60,000 Tibetans outside India, Nepal, and Bhutan in these different countries, in some 37 different countries. And if we roughly calculate as 4 persons in one family, we are talking about 1,500 families. Now, if all of these 1,500 families, it could be more, all of these 1,500 families contribute or send remittances back into India, Nepal, and Bhutan to their families at the rate of, on an average of about $3,000, then it comes to $45 million remittances from the Tibetans who have moved out. If you are talking about $4,000 per year, then you are talking about at least $60 million remittances into the country. So that adds stability, financial stability to the community. It could even be higher because the calculation I've made is very conservative. That's just to give you a bird's eye view of how our economy functions. Then there are the monastic institutions, and there are also the small businesses that caters to hospitality industry. Then you have also bigger businesses in places like Nepal and other areas. So those have not been included in the estimation that I have made above. Those, if you add all those, then there are a large number of people who are employed, and we have not calculated how much they earn a year, the salaries they make in a year, and all that. So if you add up all that, the total amount is a very good indicator that if we want, then we have the capacity to meet part and eventually whole of our expenses in the future. That is the only way how we can be self-reliant. The more and more the Tibetan community becomes independent by themselves, then they have to depend less on the Central Tibetan administration for social, educational, and health programs. Then the CTA can also start reducing or start running a lean government that can also save money in terms of expenses. Then we will reach a stage where we can pool all our energies to work on resolving the issue of Tibet rather than just taking care of ourselves in exile, which is, now you have to see, which is more important. So moving forward in the long run, it is essential that we, you and us, we come out with clear ideas and directions as to how we can help ourselves to be financially independent. And for that, we need to understand our present condition and see what can be done in the future. Now, how do we begin this? What can we do? Should you entrust the responsibility of Sikyong to me, then how would my kasha go about this? Number one, for the seasonal business, we already talked about the volume that they are engaged in, and this is going to stay for a longer period, because this is one area that we have excelled in. Even though less and less people engage in it, but we still hire a lot of people to do the business for us, so the income is still very, very relevant, and it has to go on. So from my Kashak side, what we can do is we can appoint an appropriate officer in an appropriate office, whether it has to do with the home or the finance or the Delhi office, the Delhi Bureau office. They will appoint one officer who will work with the leadership of the trading community, this Sverre association body, and look for ways and means to acquire land for their marketing site. Because marketing site, Tromsa, the place where we sell our wares, is one of the major problems for the Tibetan sweater sellers. Now, if we manage to resolve that, then they need not pay rent, and they don't have to, every year they don't have to worry about looking for new marketing sites. So that will really help I believe that will really help the Tibetan sweater selling community. And on the other hand, we can optimize their resources in terms of what they have been doing, reaching out to some 12 million Indian people. We can provide them with all the relevant information in local languages so that local Indians understand the Tibetan issue better and more deeper. Then you have the Tibetan Chamber of Commerce. Initially, when the Tibetan Chamber of Commerce was started, it was a consortium of Tibetan businesses to empower the Tibetan business community, and also to look at the possibilities of Tibetan businesses being able to employ more Tibetans. However, our people lack partnership culture. working together in big business, pooling in investment and capital and all that. And then there was also a lack of direction from the administration side and also the chamber's leadership. So we have not been able to reach or meet the objectives that was set while the Chamber of Commerce was established. So what we will do is we will cooperate with the business community, with the chambers of commerce, as required to make it effective and also provide opportunities for the business community to partner in business and developmental activities within the community. Once we take the responsibility, there will be a lot of things going on. There will be a lot of initiatives. We will need a lot of public-private partnership and involvement of the business community to develop the community as a whole. So there will be a lot of opportunities, and we will render that. Then the third group is the cooperative societies. When the agriculture sector is going down, and when the farmers are also increasingly becoming more independent by themselves in terms of the machineries they need for farming and all that, they become less dependent on the cooperatives. Now we have to look at the issues that concerns the cooperative societies and how to make it relevant in the current context. And I, for one, would encourage the cooperatives to start marketing areas in the Tibetan settlements, places, settlements which are business-friendly, settlements which has highways or roads going through them, and they have the opportunity to establish shops and businesses and theme parks and a whole lot of things. We can increase tourism in all these areas, not just Indians coming to visit monasteries and looking at the decor of the monastery, but understanding how Buddhism evolved and how Buddhism came from India and who were the masters that taught us and what we are learning. So those kind of opportunities, we can work with the cooperative societies, and I would definitely encourage cooperative societies to do wholesale business. The economy of scale, do wholesale business, more business, but less profit, so that we can sell rice or maida for the community at a very competitive rate, less than the market price. This is something the cooperatives can do and should do eventually, and the community also as a whole should encourage such kind of enterprise. Then you also have individual entrepreneurs and startups. So any adult who are interested in learning a skill and learning a skill that the community requires, and that the person thinks can make a living by settling down in the community, we will provide all the opportunities for them to be trained and also set up business. So the idea is to make them learn and earn. So that we will do. And then we will also promote promising startups. So far we don't hear too many of them, but we do hear of one or two Tibetan individuals who have very good business ideas, but they lack finance or capital to start business. So those we can help. We can help them to start their business, flourish their business. But the loans should be provided only to those who actually require it. So that will be one of our things. Then the farmers. The farmers, now over the years we have all seen, and the marginal land holdings are not able to survive to sustain a family. So now more and more farmers are more and more interested farmers are getting into more acreage in terms of farming. And to those farmers, we can definitely work with big production houses and see if they are willing to buy the products that we can farm here. At least we can be on the safe side. We can be assured of a profit. We can be assured of a return on our investment and the hard work that we put in our forms. So, and then any interested farmer will be given any kind of training that they think they need to promote their venture. Now, in terms of loans, I'm not particularly aware of how much the capital of the loan has increased after the public announcement was made there regarding the loan programs that the CTA has initiated. So once I take over, I'll make a complete assessment of the status of our capital for loans, and those who are in genuine need of capital, we will provide them with loans and we will increase their potential to the maximum. And then the last part is to connecting with the former settlement members. Now, as we understand now, at least 40-50% of the Tibetans have moved out, and between the settlement and the people who have moved out, there is an emotional bonding. So we have to increase that relationship between the settlement people who are here and the people who have moved out, and we will ask our settlement officers and the staff in the office to be on top of things, to initiate these programs, to work with the camp leaders, to work with the settlement people, and to collect data of all the Tibetans who have gone out and try to link them with the settlement here. So this will be a very, very important vehicle in the future for us to promote a cooperative effort for the development of our communities. Now, I hope you got a fair understanding of our financial position, which is the Central Tibetan Administration, where we sanctioned about $38 million by the beginning of the year, which goes up to 43 million if you include the amount that are received through the year. And if you calculate that with how much we contribute ourselves, we are able to meet only 24% of the recurring expenses to pay for salaries and office maintenance and all that, and then only 6.6% of the overall expenses. Now, if that is increased by, let us say, 5-10% of the money that were received in the interim, then that could still be less. So considering all this, you have to have a good idea as to what the financial position of the Central Tibetan Administration is and what I, as a Tibetan, can do. There we have to think. We cannot forever be dependent on others. So we have to eventually do away with the dependency culture. Individually, we have seen around here how much people have progressed, developed. Now, with all these buildings around us, it's sometimes you feel ashamed to ask people, other people for money, and some of the people who pay us money are less fortunate, less endowed than us. So we have to keep all this in mind and then think about the present. How do we do it? And in the long term. So we have to start changing our mindset of the dependency culture. We have to do away with the dependency culture eventually and see how we can stand on our own feet. So with these initiatives, gradually we'll be able to stand on our own feet, and to achieve all that, we will have to work closely with all the stakeholders as we proceed on the path to do away with dependency culture and to achieve financial independence. So the change in the mindset has to begin now. When we know that in the long run we have to reach there, then why not start it now before it is too late? Now, if you entrust me with the responsibility, my administration will lead the way, and that we will together make it happen to be financially independent in the long run. Thank you.